Hello, Lawrence. How are you?
Good, thank you.
I'm very happy to see you, and it's very difficult to get to see you because you're a very busy trial lawyer and a very
I
successful one.
I'm sorry about that. It's been extremely hectic of late for sure, but I'm glad we finally connected.
Well, I'm very happy, and I mean, I totally understand because you're in the midst of a very important trial right now in Ottawa. It's maybe one of the most important trials going on, and it is the Trucker Convoy trial. You're specifically representing Ms. Tamara Lich, and so we will be talking about that. But before we get into the Trucker trial, Lawrence, this is not your first high profile case. You've represented and successfully represented many other high profile clients before that. Most recently, you also were representing Joshua Boyle in the very controversial case that he had. And that case was very interesting because it was at the very beginning of the changes that happened on the sex assault legislation. And
Mhm.
I know you had many pre-trial applications, and you were one of the few cases that tested that legislation. So if we can maybe just start talking about that briefly, and then we'll get into the
Okay.
Trucker case.
Well, the Joshua Boyle case was, as you say, quite high profile, mostly because he had taken his wife to do his pregnant wife to do a tour of the various stands, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, and so on, at a time when most people would not have done that. Unfortunately, he and his wife were taken hostage, and actually, to some extent, the American government got involved because she was a dual citizen, and they were able to facilitate them being freed and returned to Canada. When they returned to Canada, they received a very warm welcome from the Prime Minister. So that the couple had quite the profile on them once they had gotten back to Canada. Not long after that, Joshua was charged with a number of assaults and sexual assaults, and we went to trial before Justice Duty, who was absolutely magnificent on the case. And the reason I say that is because the Boyle case went to trial very shortly after the sexual assault amendments, what we commonly refer to as the post-Ghomeshi amendments. And every second day, there was another new part of the criminal code that had to be interpreted. We would make arguments. Justice Duty would go home that night and work till all hours, and he'd come back the next day with a brilliant ruling. Some of them we were successful on, others we were not successful on, but ultimately we were successful on the trial, and Joshua Boyle was acquitted of all counts. It was a fascinating trial because, as I say, the law was being developed as we were in the midst of the trial, and everything from her rights to have counsel, her rights to be present, her rights to see the applications that were coming before the court. All of these things were being done for the first time. So it was a very challenging case. And as I say, fortunately, we drew a very an excellent judge, and we managed to get through it quite well.
But just to go back a bit on what you were saying here, because I mean, the law was really changing at the time while that trial was unfolding. So it must have been a very stressful thing, though, for you as a lawyer to have to deal with that, because there was uncertainty about the law. We didn't really know what the implications were. How were you dealing with those issues, Lawrence?
Well, I mean, there have been there are many judges who, when you're in trial with them, they're working 16, 18 hours a day, just like you are. And in the Boyle case, there really was no other option, because each one of these applications, each one of these sections of the criminal code and subsections of the criminal code that we were dealing with had to be applied they had to be interpreted, they had to be applied, and then we had to continue going on with the trial. So there really wasn't much choice for us but to deal with it that way. I think it's it's part of the trial judges and the trial lawyers kit that these things come along from time to time. I recall a murder case that we did in Brockville a number of years ago, where by the end of the case we had probably covered 2/3 of David Pachaco's text on evidence. It was just about everything that you could imagine could be contentious was in this trial. So, I mean, you come across trials like that from time to time, and they're really worthwhile doing. And it's really what advocates want to have as a challenge. So I certainly look back on it. It was a lot of hard work, but it was something that was well worth doing.
Yes, and eventually, as you said, you actually won that trial, so it was a very successful case for you. And it was not the last high-profile case. You are right now working on a very high-profile and controversial case right now. We won't get into the case itself because it's for the courts. But what I'm interested in, Lawrence, and what I would like to hear from you is how, first of all, why did you accept to represent Tamara, other than just, of course, that's what we do as criminal lawyers, but in this particular case, there are a lot of criminal lawyers who didn't want to take on these cases, the trucker cases, because they are very controversial and they may sometimes not coincide with your own political views. And this is a very political case. I mean, it's a criminal case, but it's more political. Why did you accept or decide to represent?
My feeling on this and many other cases, not all of them, but on many other cases, is we don't as criminal lawyers, and unfortunately the public doesn't really appreciate, or a good number of people in the public don't really appreciate this, is we don't have to agree with our clients' views in order to stand up in court and vigorously defend their freedoms. And this is very much the case with the truckers. I don't need to say one way or the other whether I agree with what they were protesting, but I'll tell you, professionally, I'd go to the wall to defend their right to peaceful assembly, their freedom of peaceful assembly, their freedom of expression. I have no problem with that at all. And we get, during the course of this trial and leading up to it, there's been a fair bit of hate mail. There's a fair number of people who have emailed us at the office, have sent letters. It's really unfortunate. Fortunately, it's outnumbered quite dramatically by the number of people who call in or who email and say, what you're doing is good and it's important. I mean, we have many people who have contacted us and said, look, I was living in the downtown area and there were no problems. Yes, there were horns blowing the first week until the injunction, but then after that, there weren't any horns. It was safe. It was it was a lot of fun. The truckers were respectful. And for every person that's testified in court, oh, woe is me, my life was ruined because of the demonstration that took place over 3 weeks. For every person like that, there's been 2 or 3 or 5 that have contacted us and said, no, I was there. I was sitting in a restaurant on Friday, and this woman, an elderly woman, and she had some Nordic poles, and she looked through the window, and I saw her, and I kind of smiled at her, and she took that as her approval to come into the restaurant and tell me that she lives in the downtown area, and she was there, and she said the truckers were so polite. They helped me cross the street. There were never any problems. Yeah, the noise was difficult the first week, but then after that, it wasn't a problem. I mean, this is the other side of the coin. I think most importantly, when you're looking at it from a lawyer's perspective, you know, we're doing our job. Our responsibilities is to defend people on these types of relatively minor criminal charges. There are some very important questions of freedoms and rights in place. I started off this trial by saying, and I truly believe, in a contest between those who claim that their property rights were infringed, in a contest between property rights and constitutionally entrenched freedom of expression, constitutionally entrenched peaceful assembly, there's no contest. It's a slam dunk.
Yeah.
The freedoms should win. The property rights are not contained in our Charter of Rights, and that's no accident. That was purposely and by design. So I don't have any problem at all representing the truckers, and you know, quite apart from that, Tamara she's a really nice lady.
Well, that's what I
really
wanted to ask you, because you actually
Yeah.
got to, she's your client, so you get to see her. I've seen her in court. I haven't spoken to her, but because this is an ongoing trial and I've seen her. And she's also surprisingly, she's petite. She doesn't look like she's a threatening person or that she's a
No,
violent.
definitely not. Yeah.
So
You saw the way she interacts with everyone. You know, and we've seen a number of videos that took place, that were recorded during the course of the demonstration, and her message throughout was always, you know, we're here, we're demonstrating, this has to be kept peaceful. If you see any problems with the police, you know, take it up with the police. If you see any problems with anyone, let us know and we will contact the police. The message, you know, she's really a peace and love type of person, and quite delightful, you know, as a client to be representing.
And Lawrence, because you did mention that your office has been receiving some hate mails, but did that have any impact? Did you reconsider after getting these emails? Like, at the beginning, you have no problem as a lawyer taking on the case, but then as you get that feedback and you start to see that there is some hate towards you in your office, did that change your mind, or did you have any doubts or second thoughts about your decision to represent Ms.
No, and it's certainly not the first time. I represented Momin Khawaja, who was the first terrorist charge in Canada. I remember years ago we received we had all kinds of graffiti on our former office when I was representing a guy who was charged with blowing up a bank. I mean, you know, there's going to be this kind of backlash. I think social media has really facilitated the ability of the haters to express themselves, and they're doing it. And, you know, likewise, as I say, fortunately, the people who have come forward and said, you know, keep going, you're doing great, have outnumbered the haters quite dramatically.
And how did your family react to that? Because there's your decision as a lawyer, but also sometimes what we do, especially when it's a high profile case like this one, did your family approve? Did you face any resistance or criticism from your family about this case?
Well, my stepfather was a survivor, liberated from the Auschwitz concentration camps, and he, growing up with him, we were taught, long before I went to law school, we were taught about the importance of keeping state power in check. So I come by this kind of work very honestly, and I'm sure that my dad, if he was looking down, he'd be very proud that I was fighting on a daily basis for people's rights and freedoms. We recently were involved in bringing home 21 Canadian women and children in detention camps in northeastern Syria. And I got to believe that if my dad were alive, he'd be he'd be going, wow. So it's no, my family understands why I do it, and I think they're quite. I know they're very supportive, but I also think they're quite proud.
Well, I mean, and you should definitely be proud because it is very important what you do, and you do it at a very good and high level. But the other thing, though, that I find is a bit why some lawyers also may not want to take on the trucker cases is um, in high profile cases, or especially in criminal cases, usually the complainant is just an individual. It's really, you're going up against someone who's against your client. Here, it's
Mm-hmm.
really the government. It's really, I mean,
Yeah.
they were protesting against the government. And
Right.
so this is a bit scary for a lot of people, and especially because it is really very political. I mean, it's whether, I mean, I know it's mischief, but at the end of the day, it is really for political reasons that this whole situation happened. So
Mm-hmm.
how, like, were you scared of that, of going really directly against the government in a way in this case?
No. I mean, it's whether I'm doing civil cases and we're going against the government, insurance companies, big business, or we're in the criminal courtroom and you're up against the crown and the government. It's the same. It's a very similar mindset. I mean, the American Trial Lawyers Association is an example. About 95% of their members do plaintiff civil litigation, which we do, and criminal defense work. And the mindset is very similar. It's it's typical. I look at it as it's David and Goliath law, but it's the kind of law that criminal defense lawyers are doing every day. So it's we know that we have to work with far less resources than the Crown has, and we do. I mean, that's it's what we do every day. So I know it's a challenge for sure.
Yes. And how have you been dealing with the media, Lawrence? Because it's a very highly publicized case. How is your interaction with them on this case, the
My
trucker
my
case?
feeling's always been in terms of the media that they can be a very effective partner for change. The combining law and media oftentimes can lead to very good results, and probably the best example of that is the 21 Canadian women and children that were in the detention camps. I don't think we could have gotten that result without the help and the focus of the media and the focus that they put on the government for allowing these women and children to basically rot in detention camps without any charges, without any reason, when the government has the ability to bring them home. And ultimately, we were successful in bringing them home, in large part because of working with the media. In terms of the truckers,
Yeah.
it's it's a daily commitment in time, and I think that I see my role on a daily basis working with the media, really to explain in simple language or simpler language what exactly has gone on that day. And it's more a public education function than anything else. There's no way that the media is going to put any pressure on a single judge, but it's certainly something that the public can be better educated about. And like, as an example, I mean, most people that don't like what the convoy did
Yeah.
had no idea that all of the truckers were given routes by the Ottawa police to the downtown core, and they were directed as to where to park on Wellington Street. Now, most people don't realize that. Now, when that comes out in evidence, I think it's important that people understand that. Most people aren't aware of the fact that there was an agreement made between Tamara Lich and Mayor Watson on February the 12th. And pursuant to that agreement, there were 104 vehicles that were moved on the Monday morning, including 4 big rigs, pursuant to that agreement. And that after that, when the truckers continued to try and reduce the footprint in the downtown area, they were stopped. They didn't decide, okay, we're not moving anymore. They were stopped by the police. And the police were, these were the PLTs, the police on the ground that had been working with to move their trucks into the downtown area, away from the residential areas. And they were told by the PLTs, we can't move anymore. And when it came out in the trial that the higher ups were being directed by the chief of police, and the quote was, not 1 inch, they were not being permitted to continue to honor the agreement that had been struck with Mayor Watson. So I don't think most people, certainly not the people that don't like the convoy or what they did or how long they lasted or the horns, I don't think they realized that there were ongoing efforts between the police and the protesters to concentrate the trucks, to move them onto Wellington Street, to move them onto the Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway, get them out of the residential areas. Those efforts were ongoing. They had been undertaken by the protesters, and they were stopped by the police based on the instructions that they were getting from higher up, unfortunately.
And have you been having difficulty introducing some evidence that you want to get in the trial?
The problems that we've had with the evidence so far has mostly been that witnesses called by the Crown either come to court with no notes, nothing, or conversely, they come to court and they have their notes, and they have some photographs, and then we find out, well, yeah, but you have a whole bunch of other stuff as well, and that other stuff hasn't been disclosed by the Crown in most cases because the Crown themselves don't have it. So we're finding out that there are more and more documents, emails, texts, postings that haven't been disclosed, as I say, and in most cases, the Crown wasn't even aware of them before they put the person on the stand. So those are the kinds of problems we've been having with the evidence, which has made the trial that much longer. And people keep saying to me, I keep getting asked, well, how much longer? How much longer?
Yeah.
I don't know, because as I mentioned to you before, this was supposed to be a 16-day trial. And we just finished day 21, and the Crown still hasn't finished their case. So I don't know. I just don't know how much longer. It's going to get very soon. It's going to get to the point where the Freedom Convoy trial is going to be longer than the Freedom Convoy. Yeah, we're almost there. Sadly.
Yeah. I mean, what else more are they going to bring? Like, how many witnesses of the same? I mean, aren't they saying the same thing at this point from the Crown?
Well, at this point, we're down to we've got a couple more police officers to hear from, and then a technical expert, and then that should be it. So we're certainly a lot closer to the end of the Crown's case than the beginning, and that's good. But we're running into some technical difficulties, and
yeah,
we're gonna keep slogging away,
Lawrence, I wanted to ask you for lawyers, especially newer lawyers who want to take these types of cases, but who are afraid because of the political aspect of it or the high profile aspect to it. What is your advice though for them, for someone who hasn't yet done a high profile case?
Well, I think it really presents an opportunity for a young lawyer if they have a case that is potentially newsworthy or high profile, as you put it. I think what they can certainly do is get in touch with a more senior lawyer, and with the understanding that they're going to work on that case with more senior counsel. Don't give up the opportunity because you're kind of nervous that it might go high profile. I think the better thing is to get into it, meet with the client or clients and say, look, I really want to commit to you, and I want to help you. I want to represent you. but I think it'd be best if we bring in somebody who's more senior counsel and then work with that senior counsel so that you get the experience of doing that. It's I know, some high profile cases that I did early on in my career. I mean, Operation Dismantle, I ended up with Gordon Henderson, and you can't do any better than that. In the Supreme Court of Canada, the Federal Court of Appeal, I was working with Erwin Kotler. It just I was able, to stay on those cases by bringing in more senior counsel to work with, and it was a tremendous experience.
And what advice also would you give to younger lawyers if on how to deal with the criticism or the hate mails that they might receive for these types of cases?
I mean, we have a file at the office, and that's where it goes. It goes into that file, and I don't lose any sleep over it. It's unfortunately, we don't end up representing kings and queens and princes. We end up representing people who have mental health issues and have drug addiction issues. In many cases, they've been accused of violence. But the measure of any democracy is not how we treat the kings and queens, but it's how do we deal with people who have these challenges, and how do they get a fair trial? And I mean, our job is to make sure that they do get a fair trial and that nobody's liberty is taken away until and if they're truly found guilty.
And I also wanted to ask you, Lawrence, because you've had the opportunity to represent many high-profile clients, or clients who were very much followed by the media. Did you find that there was a difference or a contrast between the way they were portrayed in the media and you as their lawyer, because you actually got to meet these people and talk to them on a personal level? Was there a difference? Were there times where you realized that the media really got it wrong and the way they're portraying your clients is really different from who they are?
Absolutely. I mean, it's I mean, I think as an example, I think back to Momin Khawaja, who was the first terrorist charged under the anti-terrorism law in Canada. And Momin was an extremely intelligent, very dedicated to extreme Islam philosophy, but he'd studied it, he'd studied the history, and he was very soft-spoken guy, as I say, very articulate, very intelligent, and he's portrayed by everyone as a terrorist. And one thinks of a terrorist, one thinks of a raging crazy person. Momin was not like that at all. He was I mean, at the time that he was charged, he was working in external affairs in the government. He was the antithesis of what you'd think as a person who's a terrorist. Tamara doesn't even drive a truck. I mean, it's like, people have all kinds of impressions of the people that we represent, and sometimes they're spot on. Other times they're way off, and they're people, and they many times the caricature that appears in the media or in the public forum is very different from who they really are.
And do you, as a lawyer, have an obligation? Do you feel that you have an obligation to restore their image in the public opinion?
Not really. I think our job is much more to deal with the charges themselves. If by through the process it can become clear that that's not who they are, then great. But our job really is far more focused on defending the various and the specific charges that are being laid, rather than trying to make them out as a good guy. The best way to make them out, at least to some people, that they're a good guy is to have them acquitted. There are many people who, no matter what we do, will never change their impression of these individuals, because as far as they're concerned, if they were charged, they must be guilty.
Exactly.
The presumption of innocence is not something that they understand or appreciate or that they've ever grown up with, you know.
And some people don't even bother to follow to see what happens ultimately. Like they just
very true.
They're
very
stuck
true.
at the fact that, well, that person was charged for that offense, so that's it, and that's the impression they have. Yeah. So I mean, hopefully, you'll have another excellent result in this case.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Now, if my mother was alive, she would have said, Lawrence, you sneezed on it, so it must be true. So I think that'll apply to the last thing you said to me, Maya.
I hope so. But so Lawrence, if you can tell us, so we know that right now you're involved in this high profile case. Are there any other high profile cases that you're working on that are coming up soon?
There's a Quebec woman, Canadian Quebec woman who's in detention camps in northeastern Syria. Her 6 children are there in the detention camp. The 6 children were given permission. The government of Canada was going to bring them home, repatriate them, but not the mother. And so we're going to federal court to try and challenge that decision. We're waiting on the Supreme Court of Canada. We have an application for leave on behalf of the 4 Canadian men that are in northeastern Syria prison. We're also waiting on an application for leave in the Supreme Court of Canada on behalf of Justice of the Peace Julie Lauzon. Although we were successful at the Court of Appeal on her behalf. There are issues there of freedom of expression and judicial independence, and we're waiting to see whether the other side is going to get their application for leave, whether they will be successful, and whether we go to the Supreme Court of Canada on that as well. So lots happening. It's I think the Chinese say, may you live in interesting times.
Yeah.
These are interesting times for sure.
They are, and definitely the case of Justice of the Peace Lauzon is something that the whole criminal law community was very much interested in. So I think we will all be eager to know what happens there, and we will love to have you back again to talk about this case specifically, because it is a very interesting case.
Let's see where that one goes.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you so much, Lawrence, for your time. I know you're very busy and you're still in this trucker case. It's still ongoing. I wish you the best of luck. I know your client is in very good hands. So, so thank you so much, and best of luck.
Okay, we'll talk again. Take care.
Yes.